So the PHP file has both HTML code and PHP code too. So what it does is it separates the PHP code and HTML code. It catches the HTML, caches. Okay, so now here only takes the PHP script, it compiles the script, then it converts them into opcodes. Okay, opcodes, then optimizes those opcodes, then caches them out. Like, okay, it separates PHP and HTML, compiles. It doesn't compile HTML, it compiles PHP and keeps there. Now here it combines both of them. Okay, now I'll place you in your respective places, converts to dot whatever HTML content. Okay, it converts to HTML content, and it says it compresses it and gives back to web browser. So wherein it gets decompressed. Okay, so this is the reason for PHP to be faster. Like, since PHP code is executed separately. Okay, PHP code is separated, and this is just HTML, and here PHP is done. So this is the sole reason for PHP to be faster, and PHP is gets embedded very easily into HTML, which we'll be seeing pretty soon. Okay, so this is how a PHP code goes. So PHP code should be written inside this. Whatever you write which is related to PHP, it should go in these two tags, and it has a it should have a .php extension. If you put .html extension for a PHP tag like this, it does not execute this, because it separates the HTML. If you have .html extension, it even rejects, saying, okay, though there is a PHP code inside, the extension is .html, I won't do anything to it. But if there is no PHP content, still if the extension is .php, still it goes here up to this point. So it separates HTML, separates PHP. If you have no PHP into it, yeah, it comes directly here because there is nothing in there. So, and renders back. So that's called stupidity when there is PHP code and .php extension. So I always tell people, like, okay, if there is no PHP code, then it should be .html extension, not .php extension. Right? So now, this is the thing. Now, why PHP? Why PHP? Okay, fine. This is the thing. So how a PHP code? This is done now. Since this is done, any questions there? So this is done. It's a pretty bad diagram. No. And Kavita, do you have any questions? Great. So that is it. And now why PHP? When I talk about why PHP, I'll talk about PHP in this part. Types of websites. So we'll get a clear idea of why should we use PHP actually. When we have HTML, why do we need PHP? And HTML is a website too, right? So now, where do we get documentation? So people always talk about, when they talk about PHP, they talk about the history of PHP, who has invented PHP, why did he invent PHP? So I feel like we don't need that information. So if you really insist on, what do you mean by programming code has to be different from HTML? No, they can be the same file, except that there be .php extension, which I was talking here. The whole point of this particular thing is like, okay, you have HTML. Okay, again, I explained here. I'm talking about presentation and data access. So presentation is nothing but my HTML, whereas data access database. Okay, so PHP is just a bridge. It's a business logic, combining both my database and my presentation. So that is one advantage of PHP. Why do we need PHP? That's a good point to be noted. But yeah, so now where do we get the documentation? So I'm just sharing my screen. When I share my screen, I won't be in the class. I'll be away from the class. You can still use the chat box to communicate with me. I'll be coming for every 5 minutes, which I'll be explaining in every class. Alright? Can you guys see my screen here? Yeah. Yes, no? Great. So yeah, Taufik, could you just explain, Ankush, what we have talked until now? So he might be missing out few things. Hey Ankush, this is Sagar. I'm the Tutoslive. So we have Taufik, Kavita, and Priyanka here. So you guys just have a chat, and you cannot talk actually. You can only communicate using this chat box here, which are. So if you want to talk to me, use a chat box. That's the only way we can communicate. You can hear me, but I cannot hear you. Okay, so we are just talking about how PHP is compiled. We talked about web architecture here. We talked about the Zen engine, and this is typically how it's not Zen engine. Let's. Okay, and then we talked about the Zen engine, how typically a PHP code is compiled. Okay, again, PHP is a scripting language, unlike it's not a programming language. Okay, this one thing should be told. I assume you guys know it. PHP is a scripting language. So we talked about this again in the first class. So that's the reason I skipped it. It's not a programming language. So what's the difference actually? Do you guys know any difference about programming and scripting language? Any difference? You know, anybody can answer. Ankush, Kavita, Taufik. What's the difference between a programming language and a scripting language? Okay, nice. That is JavaScript actually. Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, if you say that, let's assume this is a script tag. Let's convert this to JavaScript. Let's compare this with JavaScript. So JavaScript code is also written between script and script. Okay, so PHP code is written between these two tags. So in a way, Kavita's analogy of JavaScript and PHP is absolutely right. Like, whenever I want to write a script in JavaScript, I can just embed it in my body and write. Okay, fine. I'll tell the difference between these two. So let me use this space here. So the primary difference, okay, programming language should be compiled and run, whereas scripting language uses interpreter. Like interpreter is saying, compilation and interpretation is different. Actually, interpretation is there's a direct meaning for every tag, so that's interpretation. Whereas compiling is like it has to pull some libraries, apply them, and understand the internal logic, then build something, then run it. So there's a lot of process in programming languages. So programming languages have a hell lot of rules.